Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Tracy, Gilano, Bella, and Ymir. I hope you're all doing well. I don't know if below average, I'm guessing below average went to bed. And Greensville might also have gone. Hey, Puppeteer. I hope you're all doing very well. So what this stream is going to be is sometimes on those streams where I've actually planned something specific to do that sometimes might take my attention away so that I can't actually have like a long discussion about something. Or we talk about it and then I'm like, oh, there's also this other thing, and then we don't actually finish on it. So sometimes I know some of you guys actually like to have the opportunity to just talk about a subject. So this stream is a very good opportunity to do that. That could be, how do you feel like this job does X or Y? Or do you have any advice for me if I'm playing this and I'm doing this? Whatever it could be. We also somewhat recently added a... Oh yeah, there's Santu. That was actually you were thinking about, where you said that you prefer to come to the streams that aren't as story focused, because it gives actually an opportunity to talk a bit more about job stuff. And Coco's here too, checking in from work. Santu says I'll try to be on and off whenever I'm waiting for Party Finder to fill, but might be absent a lot due to trying to prog P9S. I have heard that I believe it was Bondi from the Discord community said that the P9S has the new Devour. Also, try saying P9S quickly, like 5 times. I'm not going to do it. Right, so the things that I have on my schedule is that we have a channel on the Discord server, the Discord community server, which I might as well paste you a link for that, for those that don't know what that is, where you can post a clip, preferably of either yourself playing or someone you know playing, so that you know that they consent to me actually reviewing, and then we will take a look at the clip and see, can I give you some advice? Maybe someone else watching the stream can give some advice, so that the person can learn something. So far we just have Orion, who I believe is not available right now, so they'll have to watch the VOD later, but that also means that we all get the opportunity to review them without them getting to defend themselves. I'm of course just trying to be funny. We're going to be nice. I'm going to be nice, at least. So we're going to be doing that, and then there's also some other subjects that I have on the schedule if we don't have that much to talk about. And to start off, as you may have seen, especially if you're a member of the YouTube channel, just saying it again because we did talk about it Tuesday, but we have gotten some new emotes. Those also available on the Discord server, so if you have Nitro, you can join the Discord server and boom, now you have like 16 new emotes to use all over the place. But some of them are available as a YouTube membership perk. And those were all drawn by Nisa over on Twitter, which has a link there. So if you would like to commission them something, if you have something you'd want drawn yourself in that wonderful art style, then you know where to look. They're not super big, so it might be difficult to find them on your own. But I just wanted to bring that up. Credit where credit is due. It is hard to say P9S quickly. And Greensville says, nice clean inventory. Thank you. I actually cleaned it up so that I only use 1 quarter recently, which required me to, you don't want to check out my retainers. But my inventory is pretty clean. You don't need to carry everything around with you. Right. So, the Orion clip. We can start with that. Now, I have the clip open here. First thing you'll notice is it's in Danish. I think, does it work if it's full screen, or do I take up too much space? I'm perfectly covering the chat log. So the clip is going to be 1080p. I can see that we actually have 4K available, but I don't think that my internet wants that while I'm also streaming. And also you wouldn't be able to tell the difference because this stream is 1080p. So I've specifically been allowed by Orion to review this clip. So it's a clip of Orion playing Reaper, doing the Elphic encounter, and what's her name? In Euphrosyne, or Eurovision, as it's nicknamed. This is particularly interesting because if, for example, you watch my Reaper guide, or most guides for that matter, what you will typically see... By the way, I'm going to... I think... Is the music distracting? Or should I turn it off? This clip has no sound. Orion told me that they recorded it and posted it muted because I am also in this Alliance raid and they were watching the stream. So it would be very distracting to have both voices talking at each other. So I suppose the music is fine. We can also change it to battle music if you want. But yeah, what makes this clip interesting to watch is that in most guides, like almost all guides, what you will be taught is how to open a fight from like no resources. Hey Skeleton Orchestra, hope you're doing well. You will see how the opener works, then you will be told how the rotation works, and then you might be explained how the 2-minute burst works. Some guides will even go out of their way to explain, what if my cooldowns misalign, like something drifts out of position, what do I do then? But you don't actually see very much, like, what do I do if I'm entering the fight with, like, half of my resources already? Do I open differently? Should I open differently? Can I open differently? And what happens is some players will just go, nope, I'm just doing the open. I'm just going to ignore the part where I have resources. Some players are going to go and actually freestyle it because of the fact that you already have a lot of resources. You look at your knowledge, how do I open a fight, and go, I can't apply this here. And then you just do nothing with it. So I don't know what's in this clip. I have briefly clicked through it to see that it works right, and in case there was sound, but there is not. Right, so let's actually look at it. No, the stream has not frozen, it's a standstill image. Emir says, I can only watch the streams at 144p. Ooh. Well, I hope you can see like the blobs that I'm pointing at when I'm pointing at them. I'm going to like move the mouse a bit to indicate what I'm pointing at, so there's a chance you can find it on the screen, because I do realize my mouse isn't really big. Might maybe have to look into making that easier in the future. And for future reference, if you want a clip of your own reviewed like this, I'll bring this up again afterwards. There is like a clip review channel on the Discord. Now, let's see what happens. So there's 2 targets. Reaper does not really benefit much from there being 2 targets with both Nemea and Altic. So generally you just want to focus the same target as everyone else, and you can see me there. So let's see the start. We have Harvest Moon prepared. That's an important detail. A lot of Reapers forget to use Soul, so they just don't get to have it. Now, that is an interesting thing, because if it's not used at all in the fight, then Orion is going to lose out on a little bit of damage. Let's see. Death's Design is up, so we want to keep track of whether that stays up. Arcane, was that late weaved? Yes, that was a perfectly nicely late weaved Arcane Circle. That is good in the opener, especially if you have a slightly faster GCD, which most people will have if they haven't actively gone out of their way to have a slow GCD. So that is perfect. Now, I'm going to guess, Orion might be using Gluttony next. There was a moment there where no GCD happened, that's fine. What did they use? They used Soul Scythe, that was a 10 soul gauge that wasn't spent. But according to the correct, the opener from my guide, that's what you're supposed to do. Orion also used True North, which I believe my guide suggests to make it easier for you. Now the problem is that you can't both late weave Arcane Circle and then also weave True North. Because if you late weave it, then you don't have any more space to weave. So if you want to do that, what you should do is you should early weave True North, late weave Arcane Circle, and then Soul Scythe. If you want to do it specifically like that, the probably better option is you're probably going to be using Gluttony next, and you need True North for the two actions you're going to do after that. So optimally, you want to use True North after Gluttony in this case, so you should use True North after Soul Scythe. That is the first tip. And there was the Gluttony, and Gallows, and Gibbet, and there was also a Bloodstock, and another Gallows, and I just want to point out, we are at full Shroud gauge, like you can't have any more. So Plentiful Harvest goes out, which wastes 50 Shroud gauge, which is not super great. But again, this is exactly it. Orion has gone with the strategy of, I'm just going to ignore whatever resources I have when I go into this fight. I'm just going to do it by the book and just ignore whatever I have beforehand. That is not entirely correct, because Orion did skip over and do Bloodstalk for like a third Gibbet and Gallows, which you normally wouldn't be able to do like that. But this is like the big mistake here. That's a lot of resources wasted. That's like an extra in Shroud just gone in the wind. But if you choose to go, I'm just going to focus on the accurate, correct opener, this is technically correct. So we do Plentiful Harvest, then we do Harvest Moon. Don't have to do that there. And there's the Charm coming out very soon also from Nemea, and Enshroud happens. And the lucky thing is that the hard version, I believe, is I always have to like mouse over the this hard thing from Nemea because I always flip them up, but I'm pretty sure the actual filled out hard is if you look at her when the timer runs out, then you get charmed, which probably means that you can't dodge this Mithril Great Axe and you die. But you're not going to be looking at Nemea, so that is like completely ignored. You don't have to do anything with this mechanic if you're just positioning yourself correctly. And that is probably going to happen again. Now, aside from that, the Enshroud worked well. Death's Design was refreshed accordingly. So the first thing, so now I said a lot of things about what went wrong with the opener. Now, when I'm not going to be like going back and double reviewing everything, but I just want to like explain in the opener what could have been done differently. So what you could have done is you could use Enshroud now. Like right now, you could even use it a few seconds before that while they're just talking and you can't target anything. Because if you've seen the 2-minute burst of Reaper, the reason why you actually like mold in 2 Death's Design applications in the burst is because you need to play for like an extra 5 seconds so that the Enshroud cooldown can like end. And you just need 2 because Plentiful Harvest is going to be used when you come out. So if you use Enshroud early and you have 30 seconds to spend it, so you are not in a hurry to spend it, like that, it takes like 8 seconds. Like 8 seconds to spend your entire Enshroud. 8 or 9. So those 30 seconds are... You can use the majority of it just looking at Oilthick if you want. So you could use Enshroud now and just have the timer tick. And then you could use here, you could use Death's Design and Arcane Circle. So like Death's Design, Arcane Circle, which you were going to do anyway. And then you just immediately do your 1-2-1-2 Communio combo. And then you can use Plentiful Harvest. And then do an Enshroud again. And then do that again. So the key here is that instead of doing the proper opener, you do like a cold open 2-minute burst, like immediately from a standstill position. Which is perfectly possible. You just have to consider it. So that's what I would have done in Orion's position. I would have seen, oh, I can actually do a 2-minute burst and do that instead. And you can call it a 2-minute burst, but it's basically just a double Enshroud. It maximizes the damage you can do within raid buffs, and that is especially significant in an alliance raid because most raid buffs come out like that when you pull the boss, because people don't care that much about like buff alignment and stuff like that in casual content, which is fine, normal, unneeded to think about, but that's what's going to happen. We don't see that yet. We see this arcane, like regarding those buffs, we can see Arcane Circle, we can see a Chain Stratagem from I believe I was complaining that the other scholar kept using Chain Stratagem when I was using Chain Stratagem in this alliance raid, if I remember correctly, so that could be mine. And Kwasadi is also in the raid, that is true. Kwasadi is also here. And also Hey Maha. So that is like the big difference, is that instead of doing the proper by the book opener, if you already have 50 Shroud gauge when you start the fight, do the 2-minute burst. Just open with that. You can even use the Enshroud early to make it easier for you. There's also the part that you might actually need to use Death's Design twice. So you go Death's Design, Arcane Circle. And then you go through with your entire burst. And double Enshrouds and everything, because it takes a while, so those 30 seconds might actually not be enough. You might need 60. And well, hey, thank you, Maha. Welcome to the cultists of the pink, or the cult of the pink. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy access to the new emotes and everything else. Thank you so much. Right. So I have let this clip go for a little bit. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to be looking at like some major things that might go wrong. Like, for example, is a cooldown just sitting there that Orion could have used? Is a mechanic done completely wrong? Are you losing a lot of uptime for some reason? Things like that. But this opener thing was like, it's like a pretty big part, so that also means we're going to be taking a little look at what Orion does with the 2-minute burst. And there's also the part, while we go here, that sometimes it's not optimal to use your 2-minute burst at the 2-minute mark. It's not always optimal. Like, imagine if you don't have any uptime during your 2-minute burst. Then it's completely wasted. So Orion specifically positioned themselves so that they are absolutely not looking at Nanea. And also positioned well for positionals, hopefully. Bit hard to see. If I'm playing melee, so this is a very good spot to be just in general, like, safely behind the boss. But if you stand over here, just checking my stream footage to see if you can even see it. If you stand over here, where the open and closed bit of the targeting reticle like switches, or over here, that also works, but specifically you want to stand like right where it flips between open and closed. And when I talk open, I mean this part, you know, the quarter of the targeting reticle where there's nothing, versus the targeting reticle where there's something. That is a really good place to be as a melee DPS, because the flank, so for positionals, the flank is like these 90 degrees over here, all of the 90 degrees, as also all the way into the center of the boss, and these 90 degrees over here. The rear, which you need for your other positionals, is the entire open part. So that means that if you stand over here, then you don't have to move as much to get your positionals, and especially if you're still learning a DPS, you might, like, especially with something like Reaper, where the positional comes up, like, very rarely, you might be, like, the fact that you're out of position for your positional might sneak up on you. Like, you're about to do it, and then you go, oh yeah, I'm not standing in the right spot. So you have to like run over, and the biggest mistake you can do there is having your GCD just sit there while you're doing that. It's better to use the GCD immediately, do the attack, than doing it in the correct position. Just do it and just be at the correct spot next time. I talk about this in some of my job guides as well, but generally, if you're out of position and your GCD is already ready, too bad. Use the attack, because if you delay that attack by 1 second, then you're losing more damage than you would have gained from having the positional correct. You can also just use True North. That Reaper is in a very convenient spot with that. Let me just see there. Oh, that's very nice. I think Gluttony came out precisely on cooldown. Yep. And then we had the problem with True North again. That was what I was about to say here, is that you can use True North every time Gluttony comes up, to make sure you can just completely ignore the positionals, and if you plan your resources well, you can actually ignore nearly all of the positionals the Reaper has. Like, from start to finish, you never have to think about positionals, because you just have True North whenever they come up. But that requires, like, pooling Soul Gauge, which can be difficult to manage. But yeah, you do, like... just to take it one more time. A little slower, maybe. So, right here, if you use an OGCD here, hey Skid, how are you doing? If you use an OGCD here, which is what is going to happen, it actually happens here. That is actually too late. If your connection is decent, then the OGCD takes about 0.625, so a fourth of 2.5 seconds to resolve. Now, if you have no skill speed, then it means when... yeah, that works. When this part, this like last bit, this part here, which is, let me just, when your GCD looks like this, that is your last chance to late weave. Which means if you do it here, then you're going to clip your GCD, which means that even if Orion were to try to use a GCD now, when they're using True North, it would have been delayed by a few milliseconds, maybe. Maybe like a few frames. Hello, Gazel, thank you so much. But instead, Orion chooses to use True North, which delays the GCD by a further quarter of 2.5 seconds. And then they use their GCD. Now, that means that we have delayed the GCD by nearly a second to use True North. Again, it's not huge. We're in an alliance raid, it's fine, but you generally don't want to do that. The instant that your GCD is ready, everything else goes on the back burner. You need to do the GCD first. There are nearly no exceptions. I think one of the few exceptions in an optimal opener is Black Mage, where they weave triple cast while the GCD is ready because cast times. That is like the only exception I know of in an opener where you would do that, because it's simply too far too costly to delay your GCD. So that's like the big problem in this particular review that Orion has. They've done it twice. It's specifically with Gluttony and True North where this problem comes up, I think. So there was a refresh of Death's Design. Good. There was like 5 seconds left of it, so that was very nice. And we continue a little bit. There was all resources are used so far. Are you staying in melee range? You can go in early with this one. There's nothing else happening. Very nice. And then you don't want to be in it because the magic vulnerability makes nearly any other mechanic in this fight kill you. So you only want to stay in it when nothing else is happening. Right, and the Arcane Circle is coming up soon, and this mechanic tends to mess up a lot of people. Very nice. Better to move in exactly on time. Arcane Circle is ready. Now, here's a problem. And the mistake happened right... Let me just find it exactly. The mistake that led to that problem happened there. Because that Enshroud we needed for the 2-minute burst. We needed that one later. Now that would be difficult to know beforehand. The thing is that it takes a long time to build 50 Shroud Gauge. So with 40... is it 47? 47 seconds on Arcane Circle, that means you have like actually only like 30 seconds to build the Shroud Gauge for the first Enshroud in your 2-minute burst. If you want to do it optimally, of course. So I don't know what Orion's thought process was here, but my guess is that when they saw, let me just see, when they saw Arcane Circle hit 8 seconds, like depending on how aware of the 2-minute burst optimization Orion cares about, like how much they focus on it, they might have thought at the 8-second mark, oh no, I messed up, because you need to use Enshroud now. Like this is when they needed it. 40 seconds later, like so. Orion basically... Actually, what happens? How is it that they have so little resources generated in this time? But that means Orion made a mistake in their rotation, and then 40 seconds later it comes up. My best advice here is, if you don't know for certain, as a Reaper and you're trying to optimize, like you're still practicing, if you're not certain, take like a glance at your Arcane Circle. It has to be like that. The cooldown has to be pretty long for you to like safely go down to 0 Shroud Gauge. If you're not sure, then remember that the only action that can generate more than like 10 or 20 Shroud Gauge in quick succession in your entire toolkit is Plentiful Harvest, which is in your 2-minute burst. So as long as you're below 80 Shroud Gauge, you're good. You don't have to spend it. But if Gluttony is coming up soon and you are above 80, then you have to like go, oh, Gluttony is coming up in like 10 seconds. I have to use Enshroud now so that doesn't get to sit and hang. But if you spend all of your Shroud Gauge, then you will be in trouble if you do it at the wrong time. it's like, again, it's like, in casual content, you don't have to do that. I'm sure Orion was like, if Orion was like, you know, not listening to me, and instead was just power gaming with their favorite music, they would have gotten this perfect. I could have easily made this mistake myself, and if I did that on stream, I would probably go, oh, whoops, I needed that shroud gauge earlier. Or later. So now the next issue is, we have Arcane Circle ready. We want to use Arcane Circle. We still want... Now there's the Arcane Circle, so now we know that Orion has either wasn't planning on doing a 2-minute double in Shroud Burst, or they've just given up on the possibility. They go, oh, it'll take me like 20 plus seconds to do that. No chance. Now Gluttony is available. That was used on time. So what happened there is, and this is, I think it's a tip in my Reaper guide, if you use Soul Scythe together with Gluttony, you can do like one and then the other, and then you don't have to worry about stockpiling Soul Gauge for that. This can become a problem if you start to do double in Shroud Bursts, because that tends to drift Gluttony a little bit. That's why there is an alternate opener that prioritizes in Shroud first and delays Gluttony, because ultimately the fact that Gluttony comes out on cooldown early is not going to change anything, because 2 minutes later you're going to delay it. So like planning in Shroud first to get that into the raid cooldowns more reliably can be an advantage. There's also another thing that happens here, is that we have Soul Scythe, Gluttony. Wait a minute. I'm just checking something here. Right, so Infernal Scythe, Arcane Circle, and True North late weaved. That was very close, very nice. Perfectly. That was a lot better than all of the other ones we saw. And then we have Gluttony and Gallows and Gibbet, and because True North was active, that's fine. I was about to say you're not missing the positional, but if you're using True North, then it doesn't matter. And then we have the Enshroud. Now, this is fine. You're doing the Enshroud, and in the entirety of the Enshroud lands during Arcane Circle, so that's fine. You could have done more damage during your burst, but that's fine. And you also got Death's Design extended. As you can see, there's like a lot of small things that you, like, if you're really getting specific, there's a lot of small things. This part is a point where I would personally say, if you're doing no damage while this is happening, perfectly fine. It's one of those types of mechanics where if you mess it up, you're dead. It's not worth the damage if you can't, like, manage it in your head while also doing your rotation. So, like, that was completely understandable. I would probably have done something similar. And I probably did. I imagine that I was just... can we find me during that mechanic? Am I visible? Can we... We can't see... I can't see myself. I'm not casting, which means that I'm using Ruin 2. And Ruin 2. And Ruin 2. I can see it on the MP cost. So I'm just standing there just throwing instant casts, and now I'm casting again. So, as I said, I would do the same. I'm just going to do the most simple attack that I can so that I don't mess this one up. If the boss had come into melee range, it would have been a lot easier to keep up the damage, but Altic tends to do that. I did say you cast Glare, but as a white mage, it's a little harder to do nothing. Kasari. You could maybe have done like lilies or something like that, but yeah, it's a little difficult. It's a lot more difficult where a scholar you can just choose to cast Ruin. It could be dotting. I did see you cast Glare at least once. So there's the upside down heart, which I believe means you have to look at her. Is that right? Yep. Just in the nick of time. Very nice. Oh, look, that's me. And again, if you're standing over here and you mess that mechanic up, you die. The Mithril Great Axe hits like a freight train. I'm pretty sure it kills DPS and healers. might also kill the tank. And then we have a panic at the spread. Oh, wow! I'm pretty sure that landed with a magic vulnerab. I did tell you that if you stand on this, and you get hit by anything in this boss fight, you die, and then Orion is over here proving me wrong. Hey Jenny, how are you doing? So here it's happening again. So we can see Orion has resources for an Enshroud. Arcane Circle is coming up in 16 seconds. If Orion uses Enshroud now, it's a mistake if you want to do maximum damage. And let's see what happens. Extending Death's Design, that's fine. Death's Design throughout this fight has been a little bit off timing. Generally, if you're playing optimally, you don't actually have to cast Death's Design before this, because if you're doing the double Enshroud burst, you're going to be using Death's Design twice. So usually you can time it around that, and I think Death's Design might have been close enough that Orion could have done that, but that's fine. There's the Enshroud 4 seconds too early. And we can, from this, can we gather that Orion is not doing the double Enshroud burst. There's a chance that Orion isn't sure how it's done. That is also a possibility. Arcane Circle was delayed by 2 GCDs. Gluttony was delayed by 1 GCD. There was a careful Bloodstalk there that didn't go through for some reason, because Ulthig was dead. Then Orion noticed that Gluttony was ready. Now we have the problem that Nemea does not have Death's Design on her, but that's probably fine, because she's going to die in short order. But we have Gluttony. Is Arcane Circle coming? There it is. It's fine. Like, if you're going to use something during your Arcane Circle burst, then using Gabedan Gallows in it is very good. Like, it's better than nothing. But this is a very awkward time for the Arcane Circle. So there's, like, you could see I had a lot of things that I could add on this. But the general thing is that what Orion could have done better is when you're doing your opener, consider your current state. That can give you a lot of damage, because you could have opened with a double Enshroud if you had planned it. I think it still included a double Enshroud, but it was like in a really like a janky, oh right, I already had 100 Shroud gauge. There could have been 3 Enshrouds by that point instead of just 2. So that could have been a triple Enshroud opener if Orion wanted it. And then it didn't happen. So that is one thing. The other thing is, if you want to maximize your damage as a Reaper, learn the double Enshroud 2-minute burst. The general idea, I go over the opener and the burst in my level 71 to 90 Reaper guide. But the general idea, the way to memorize it that I use is when Arcane Circle is getting close to 8 seconds. That's when you have to like prepare yourself, like, it's burst time! And then you prepare, because exactly when it says 8 or 7, you use Enshroud. And then you do 1 step of the Enshroud combo, and then Death's Design, and then another step, and then Death's Design. And then you just go to town, finish it, Plentiful Harvest, another Enshroud, and then you go again. And then after that's all done, you figure out what's happening next. Like, there is something like, oh, if you have a combo going already, like you want 2, 3 combos in the middle of it, you need to extend on that right now after the burst, but you also want to consider using Gluttony, so there's like a bit of like things to consider there. But if you can just get the double Enshroud down, start with that, that's going to be huge for you. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Overall, did the boss mechanics really well. That's also really important. You didn't die. You almost died to a spread mechanic, but that specific spread mechanic is always chaos, like complete madness, because like 20 people get a spread marker or something. I'm not sure. There's so many, it's hard to count. Right. I'll just leave this open here. So, is there anything you guys would like to ask about with that clip? Anything you would like me to explain about it? That's fine. And of course, anything else throughout this entire stream, you just ask, pose a question about anything, any job, and I'll get to it. And that's fine, Skeleton Orchestra. Perfect. Good question. Jenny says, could be better, honestly, but getting it sorted out. Taking a short break right now. Well, that's nice. Ymia says, why is someone always missing? Wait, what do you mean? What, like in the clip? And Coco says, thank God I'm not in this clip. Well, we were focusing on Orion for this clip. So Skeleton Orchestra says, I've recently been curious about the AI of Living Shadow on packs. People say it prioritizes the first enemy you attack after it's summoned, but what if you do an AoE that enemy dies? Excellent question. Can we test it? Maybe? Maybe? Probably not that well, but we can try. Let me see if I can demonstrate it, or we can test it. So we're going to get enough resources for Living Shadow. That is a good question. It's not related to Reaper, but we weren't focusing on Reaper necessarily. We're learning something. So let's do science with Kai for a little bit. So what would we be interested in testing? 1. If I use Living Shadow and do nothing, will the Living Shadow do anything? Or will they attack the target that I have when I summon it? Will it attack my target? Like, will it attack my target if I use an AoE attack? Or will it attack what's closest to me? So that's also something worth considering. And I think that's pretty much all we need to know. So I'll stand here. So this one is actually closer, but I'll target this. Let me just test. Right, so both targets are in range. So that should work splendidly. So, Living Shadow. We wait a few seconds, see, do you do anything? Does not do anything, okay. Throws Abyssal Drain on this. Plunge on this. Shadowbring on that. I have a feeling Did he do any damage to this when he casts Abyssal Drain? I think I have like a follow-up thing I want to test, but we'll have to wait for the cooldown. Geisel says, may I ask, should I use Expedient on Will of the Fury or the red spread out thing? Will of the Fury is... oh, which mechanic is that? That's on Haloni, right? Can I find this information? Will of the Fury, the boss spawns a narrow donut AoE that originates from the sides of the arena and cascades inwards. Right, that one. Or should you use it on the red spread out thing? The donut shape one. Right, so the red spread out thing, which one is that? I think that Expedient is extremely smartly used on Will of the Fury, because the thing is, the way that the mechanic goes is that Haloni uses the mechanic, the outer ring becomes dangerous, but you need to get to the edge of the mechanic, and then you have to move out past it within like a fraction of a second to dodge the next one. Yeah, exactly, Pasadi. It's Will of the Fury is the one where it, like, there's an AoE and then a closer, well, donut AoE and then a closer donut AoE and a closer one, like the water waves in that Nemea summons. So, if you actually use your if you use expedient on your team when the mechanic starts, it gives everyone a better opportunity to run out to the spot they need to be to react to the mechanic. That of course means there's a good chance that the damage reduction from expedient will be over by the time the proximity AoE in the center resolves. But if you're at the edge of the arena, you're going to be taking far less damage than if you're not. And if you get hit by those closing in circle AoEs, you're dead. I almost always just flat out dead, because the damage from the donut itself plus the dot, and then the proximity AoE, which is going to do more damage because you're not on the edge, you're dead. So I would say use expedient for moving out in that mechanic, because you have to run really far actually. That's what I would do. That's what I would recommend. I can't remember what I did on that particular stream, and the clip ends there. Expedient has damage reduction? Yep. It actually gives damage reduction twice as long as the movement speed. It used to be the same. Leaky is here. I hope you're doing well. And Tracy says thanks for the stream. I'm off to work and to work things out in game. Alright Tracy, thank you for checking in. The speed is only for griefing. No, the speed is to dodge mechanics. Although if you use it at just the wrong time, someone might get messed up by it. That's what I recommend. Right, so the Living Shadow thing. So the thing I want to test is, does Living Shadow actually do any AoE damage? Because that is not actually obvious when you think about it. So the particular attack that we would want to test that with is, I'm going to move these two extremely close, so the Living Shadow is bound to hit both if it can. I'm just going to spam attacks to make sure that it goes. Right, Abyssal Drain hit both. So that's an AoE attack. Shadowbringer hits both. Edge of Shadow hits one. Bloodspiller is a single target attack. And so is Carven Spit. That's it, apparently. That's all she wrote. So to answer that little demonstration, the Living Shadow actually uses the attacks that it says that it uses, and they have the areas that it normally would. So Abyssal Drain will hit in a 5 yalm radius, and Shadowbringer will hit in a 10 yalm line AoE and things like that. So really predictable. It will attack your target. So if you're using an AoE attack, it will attack your target. I think there's one thing left to test to completely answer that question, and that is, if you use an AoE attack and you hit something, but it's not your target, then what happens? Vicky says, in Party Finder I've gotten killed by the sudden speed increase. Yeah, if it happens while you're running, you can easily like overshoot something. If you change target, will Shadow also switch? That is also something we could test. We can test this at the same time. I'll stand like here. But yeah, Expedient is extremely powerful if you have a team that actually tries to make use of it. But if you're like in a random group, then it might easily trip up someone. It might be good to like announce that you're going to use it, but you'd need to do that a few seconds in advance. So I attack this, and I target this. We use Living Shadow. And then I'll just use Unleash. Who will it attack? It will attack nothing. What if I attack this? Do you switch target? You don't. Interesting. So, what that means is the way Living Shadow works is it will not attack a target that you're not in combat with. That actually means that we have one more thing to test. But it will not attack something you're not in combat with. But it will also not attack anything except your target. But once it starts attacking something, it will not change target. Would it be tied to auto attacks? I doubt it. I doubt it. But I would imagine, I'm going to guess on this one because that's nearly impossible for me to demonstrate in a controlled environment. I would imagine that if your current target dies, then Living Shadow will just attack the next thing that you're targeting. But it might not actually have very much of a chance to do that because of how slow it acts. Like, it does like 8 things in total. There's also the interesting thing that the Living Shadow actually has a different AI to Bahamut and Phoenix. Skin asks, what is the best tank and why is it warrior? All tanks are really good. Let me get to that. Let's just demonstrate this first. So I'm going to target this and just click Living Shadow and see, does Living Shadow attack it if I'm in combat with it? No. I think it's different. That's actually something else that would be interesting to test. So it seems like it has like a set sequence of attacks. It will use Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, and Blood Spiller and Carven Spit. I didn't see if it did anything else, but to help us a little bit with that, we're going to employ Stone Sky Sea. Because that means we don't have to wait after each test. It's not super important whether we're scaled down or not. It doesn't seem to be related to auto attacks, it's just related to did you attack or not. From what I could tell, at least. So we do this. And then I summon the Living Shadow. I'm very interested to see how many actions is it going to do if I'm just going ham. Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, Blood Spiller, Carven Spit. So there's one very, very interesting thing that happens here. Or might happen here that I want to test. So that took like 15 seconds to do, 16 seconds maybe. So we go again, and then I'll see what happens if I summon the Living Shadow and just have it like party with me and just hang out for a little bit, and then I call upon it to attack. How much of the attacks will it perform anyway? So we summon it, and then I'll wait until, like, let's see, so it's ready now at 15, so I'll wait until 10 seconds. So, Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, and then Blood Spiller. So it lost the Carven Spit. I think it was just the Carven Spit it lost. So what's interesting about that is that that means that it actually acted a little bit faster to try and get more damage out. The reason why that's interesting is because Bahamut and Phoenix actually works like that too. Let me show you that. I think it just skipped Quietus. So did it actually use Quietus when we were fighting earlier? That is an interesting point. Does its arsenal vary depending on what the enemies are. So if I summon Bahamut, just to demonstrate this other thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. It should be always 4 attacks, but the interesting thing is that if you don't have an attack target for Bahamut for like half of its duration, it will still do 4 attacks. Which is what I'm going to show you. So if you paid attention to how slow Bahamut did things, so it's just hanging out. So I attack now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, well, it goes to that last one because because it didn't have enough time. But if you noticed, it was like attacking like 50% faster to try and do it. Which is like an interesting detail. That was what I was trying to test with Living Shadow. And a bonus thing Skeleton Orchestra asked about is, did it just skip Quietus? I don't think it used Quietus. Did it? Did it use Quietus when we were doing just the actions at first? Let me just roll that back on the stream myself. I'm just checking on my other monitor to see it. See, does Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Shadowbringer, Age of Shadow, Blood Spiller, and then Carven Spit, and then it leaves. So, there's a good chance that it actually varies what it does based on the amount of targets. Hey, FFXIV, thank you so much. Hey, you used the late Gluttony opener. Right, so the one where you do Enshroud first. Skeleton Orchestra says, in your old Dark Knight guide I referenced it used Quietus, but like it changed since then or something. That might be. I do remember that it used Quietus as well. My guess is either they have changed that, or it depends. So let's see what happens if there's 3 targets. Do you care, Shadow? Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Shadowbringer, Edge of Shadow, Blood Spiller, and then Carven Spit. I think they've changed it. That is also, it makes sense that it would be adjusted, because in the Dark Knight guide, that was actually before Blood Weapon got reworked. So back then, you had like 10 seconds to get as many GCDs in as you could, which usually meant 5 if you had enough skill speed. Which also led to this shenanigans with spamming Quietus. A very interesting, very interesting discussion with Living Shadow. Like, it's the kind of mechanic that is really weird. Based on the damage it did, it also seemed like, for the most part, the damage was like normalized in a way. The only exception being that the Shadowbringer attack hits a lot harder, but all of the other attacks seem to be like just 350 potency. 350 potency, with like some sort of drop-off. I would guess maybe that that Living Shadow might use Quietus when it doesn't have Shadowbringer yet. This is actually also something we can test. Apparently it's 270. What's 270? And 300 after the enhanced trait. Well, it says it's actually, I think it's been buffed because it says 350 here. But yeah, we can test this. We can just scale ourselves down to a level where we don't have Shadowbringer and see then what does the Living Shadow do. That of course also means that it gets scaled down to 280. Apparently it was 280. That can very easily... It's very easy for these things to go out of date because things change with every patch almost. Abyssal Drain, Plunge, Flood of Shadow, that makes sense, Edge of Shadow, Blood Spiller, and Counter Spell, so it just uses Flood of Shadow instead. That also makes sense. But I think they've just reworked it. Skeleton Orchestra says those numbers were from an FAQ on Icy Veins. Oh, it wouldn't surprise me if Icy Veins data is a little outdated. I don't know how invested Icy Veins is in making guides for Final Fantasy XIV, but when World of Warcraft was doing extremely badly, they pivoted to making Final Fantasy guides, and I do believe the Machinist one is supposed to be pretty good. But for the most part, I don't know if they're like, if they're considered like on equal footing to something like the Balance. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's outdated. Escafide says not quite in Shroud first. It's Shadow of Death, 2 Soul Slices, then Gluttony, followed by you see 2 Slices, then Gluttony. That is that your own opener, or is it something that is recommended somewhere? I'm very curious. In early Endwalker, right. Things have changed. Things at times change. So the openers that are commonly referenced nowadays are called the Early Enshroud opener and the Early Gluttony opener. The Early Enshroud opener is signified by using Shadow of Death, Arcane Circle, then 2 Soul Slices. I think actually I probably have this written out. Right, so we have the early Enshroud and the early Gluttony opener. Whoop. So the early Enshroud opener, you can see it is signified by Shadow of Death, Arcane Circle, 2 Soul Slices, and then Plentiful Harvest. The only reason why you do 2 Soul Slices is because you need to get through both Soul Slices anyway, and Arcane Circle isn't going to allow you to use Plentiful Harvest until here. So you're just using 2 to play for time, and then use Enshroud as early as feasibly possible, like exactly the instant that it is possible you use Enshroud and do all this. Now, the reason why you do that is because yeah, exactly, Licky. If you have so if you have skill speed, beyond like 248, then you have to make sure that you, I believe it's okay. So here's the trick. If you have nearly no skill speed, then this Arcane Circle can go here, I believe. No, wait, no, that's wrong. That is over here that makes sense. If you have any amount of skill speed, then I think this has to be early weaved, I'm pretty sure. Then you do 2 Soul Slices and Plentiful Harvest. The general idea is that this opener is very, very, very skill speed strict. You need to minimize your skill speed, otherwise, as Licky mentions, you will clip. Because of that problem, because Plentiful Harvest is very specific when it's going to be ready. So you need to early weave this perfectly, then it might work out. But the reason why we do this in this way, and why it's important and significant to use Enshroud this early, is because normally in a coordinated raid setup, people will use their raid cooldowns 3 GCDs into the fight. So we go 1, 2, 3, boom. So you use Plentiful Harvest exactly when the raid cooldowns come up. Which is fine, because Plentiful Harvest hits really, really hard. But then you want the Enshroud to also be in it. Like, if you use this opener, then I'm pretty sure like it's after the second Gibbet and Gallows that it becomes problematic. Licky says you must be exactly 2-5 for early Enshroud. I'm pretty sure it's not that strict. But it's a little difficult to find that exactly. So the reason why I'm saying, oh well, SK, you don't need to screenshot this. These openers are in my Reaper guide, like my level 71 to 90 Reaper guide that I released somewhat recently. So if you've watched my job comparison videos, they refer to an old Reaper guide for now. But if you go to my channel, or you just look for my name and the channel, like my channel's name, and then look for Reaper guide, you will see a much prettier thumbnail. That's going to be the one you want to click on. I will refresh the links on the job comparisons when I'm done refreshing my job guides, which is still a little bit in the future. Anyway, the point is that, so when you use Arcane Circle, it takes exactly 6.7 seconds. 6.7 seconds, that's really important, from using Arcane Circle till you can use Plentiful Harvest. So, if you use Shadow of Death and early weave, so you just click Arcane Circle instantly when it's available, right? The instant you can, you click Arcane Circle. Then it will come out somewhere between half a second later and like a fourth of 2.5 seconds, or maybe later if your latency is really bad. But that means that 2 seconds will pass, you use Soul Slice, 2.5 seconds will pass, you use Soul Slice again, and then 2.5 seconds will pass. So if you don't early weave it, you will have problems if you have any skill speed. And we can also test this, because my Reaper setup has a little bit more skill speed than you'd like. So let's see what happens if I do that. Tantan says, I don't get why they just don't make it available after 2 GCDs. I don't know either. Oh, actually, wait a minute. That sync might affect my GCD. Let me just make sure it isn't. I want to make sure it's 245. I want it to be slightly more than what you'd want. I believe 247 is something that is still okay-ish for Reapers, so it's really important that I have 245 to really underline the problem. That one will do. Right, so demonstration will be Shadow of Death, early Arcane Circle, 2 Soul Slices, Plentiful Harvest, and it shouldn't clip according to what I just said. You do this, Arcane Circle, Soul Slice, and Soul Slice. There was a clip, so apparently I remember wrong. Oh, right! I think I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. And Licky also knows what the problem is, I'm sure. So, I use Shadow of Death, then I use Arcane Circle. Like, so I do the early weave Arcane Circle. that means that half a second passes with Shadow of Death, then half a second passes of me using Arcane Circle. Which means that the buff activates like somewhere around half a second later. Like, ish, something like that. Which means that... Well, it means that it should also clip if you have no skill speed, if you think about it. Can we make a setup so that I have no skill speed, just to demonstrate with? Yes, we can. We test again. It's like exactly on the dot. Like, we're talking... I think what makes this work is that Arcane Circle actually starts that Plentiful Harvest timer in the middle of Arcane Circle. But I agree, Tantan. Ultimately, what this means is that 6.7 is a really awkward timing. I don't know why they do it. Also, hey, Peter. Glad to see you. It's been a while. But yeah, I would recommend checking out alternative openers, SK. The only reason you want to use double Soul Slice is to play for time for that Plentiful Harvest. The early Gluttony opener is generally recommended for most builds. Like, that one actually works regardless of your skill speed. The only thing you need to consider, and I also say this in the guide, is if your skill speed is like, if you're faster than like 247 or something like that, then you late weave this Arcane Circle before the Soul Slice. So you just grab this Arcane Circle and put it here. So just put it here and late weave it instead. So you go Shadow of Death, late weave Arcane Circle, Soul Slice, Gluttony, Gibet Gallows, Plentiful Harvest. And the reason why you do that is because that means that you have 3 GCDs between Arcane Circle and Plentiful Harvest, which means that there's no chance that this 6.7 second jank is going to cause problems. Iliki says Reaper requires at most 20 MS ping. Maybe this opener does, but overall I don't think they do. But yeah, the key thing is that with this opener, the early Gluttony opener, and it's called early Gluttony because it comes out after the second GCD. It does that because it means you can use Enshroud. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 GCDs in instead of 4. So it's like a very small trade-off, but this opener is a lot more adaptable to whatever you have in your skill speed. I do believe it does very, very slightly, like almost negligible amounts of less DPS if you're in a perfectly coordinated group. But yeah, I recommend this one, and I also mainly focus on this one in the guide, but I do mention that I do believe I mentioned that this one exists. I think I also talk about this in my Reaper part of the job comparison stuff. Hey Alif, and see, Coco says, what's the best talking to women opener? I don't know. Also, Santos said, out of curiosity, I checked Icy Veins. The tank stuff doesn't seem that different from what Balance has. So, an interesting thing with guides is that let's assume the Balance has the best guide in the world for Gunbreaker. Just as an example, right? Let's assume that then the Balance has the best guide, if Icy Veins makes a guide, it will be guaranteed to, with improvements, eventually become the Balancer's Guide. Like, if we make that assumption. Many of my guides, the openers, and a lot of the advice that I give in these guides are based on information that I, for example, gather from the balance. But I don't just go, oh, they say this opener's best, so I'll just say that. I look at the opener and figure out why it is like that. Because if I don't understand why it is like that, then I can't explain to you why it is like that. So if someone actually asks in the comments, why do you do this in the opener? Then if I don't know why, then I can't explain why. So I need to know, and then we take it from there. That's something that like the most brutal example is like Machinist, where it has a really weird opener, if you think about it. And there's probably multiple ways to do it. And exactly, like, an opener is the best when it puts most of its potency inside raid buffs. The reason why the Machinist opener is really weird is because you actually order your cooldowns in a way such that these 3 cooldowns don't, like, cause problems for anything down the line. Like, if you check the Machinist opener on the balance, or in my Machinist guide, I also have like a short where I demonstrate it. You'll see that those 3 cooldowns are used at really like awkward timings in the opener. Like, you'd think, shouldn't you use your 3 best attacks either immediately or wait until raid buffs? And then you use 2 of them immediately. And the logic is, you use Drill almost immediately because it's going to land in raid buffs anyway, and you use Air Anchor immediately because you don't actually have space for Air Anchor in the raid, in the majority of the raid buffs anyway, so it's better to use it, get it spent, so that you can get the battery. And if you delay it, then it's going to cause problems in your 2-minute burst. In 2 minutes! It's insane! Actually, my original high-level Machinist guide that I made a lot longer ago, I pretty much just gave up trying to demonstrate it. I was like, I can explain how it works, sort of, but I can't do it. I literally was not capable of doing it. And when I did it later, both for my most difficult jobs, in my opinion, and for the Machinist guide, it took me like over an hour to get it right on film. So, like, and it, of course, it's because I'm not a Machinist main, right? If you're a Machinist main and you really like sit down and master this, then you can do it. Probably. But there's also more to it than doing that. The instant you introduce anything that messes with your rotation, imagine the boss leaves for 5 seconds. The entirety of the planned 2-minute rotation, like exactly 2 minutes in, you will have 100 battery gauge and all of your cooldowns will line up perfectly. All of it just falls to the floor, just because you missed like 2 GCDs at some point. So it's like there's more to the story than just do this. And that's the truth with most jobs. It's just that with jobs that have a particularly strict rotation with no wiggle room, it's a lot more obvious. And Tantan says, I find Machinist very difficult as well, despite it being a strict rotation. Well, a job having a strict rotation means that you could pretty much like write out the rotation from start to finish at any point if you'd like. But that makes it difficult because 1, you have to memorize it. And 2, because imagine if you miss a single GCD, then you forget where you are, and then you're in trouble. So it's totally understandable. Paladin has a technically strict rotation, but it's very free-flowing by design nowadays. It used to be a lot stricter. Alright, Maha, thank you for checking in, and welcome to the Cult of the Pink. Exactly, Paladin used to be extremely strict. It's actually, Paladin used to be so strict that when the Paladin rework came around, many of like the old guard of the Paladin mains refused to accept that atonement dropping was no longer optimal. And now with the recent 6.4 changes, it is even less suboptimal. It's like there's not really a competition anymore. Like, yes, you can optimize your burst a little bit by doing like atonement dropping shenanigans if you need it, but the potency difference between doing so and not doing so is like 50. And the potency you lose from atonement dropping can range between nothing to 250, which is worse. Caetsu says, reminds me of that summoner. That summoner used to have pretty much a 2-minute rotation. Yeah, that's true. Because they had like 2 1-minute rotations that just like flowed between each other back in Shadowbringers. That was difficult. Very difficult to raid lead, doing something like a E6S while also playing summoner optimally. Speak from experience. Santos says, I mostly drop atonements because it feels nicer more than anything, having more consistent burst. That's fair. I'm just saying that if you check my somewhat recent level 90 Paladin guide, the explanation is somewhat there. The burst that you will get in the priority system rotation is almost always going to be like Holy Spirit and 2 atonements, or 2 Holy Spirits and Royal Authority. Whereas when you're doing atonement dropping, you're actually sacrificing DPS to have it always be 2 Holy Spirits and Royal Authority. And the potency difference in total is 50. Now, the reason why it was a problem with the priority system rotation before 6.4 is because like multiple times your burst would include like a fast blade or a riot blade, which, you know, that would cost you 150 or 250 potency in your burst. That's a lot more painful. But I think I don't know how big the difference is. I think that atonement dropping might be close enough that like you will probably still beat the priority system if your raid does perfect cooldown alignment, and you have like then you're so close that you can't. I wouldn't be able to tell whether you're using priority or atonement dropping unless like I analyzed your logs and went, oh, you drop an atonement here and here and here. But it is really close. Caetsu says P9S party is filled. Okay, good luck. Hope you get the clear and get some loot. Did I miss anything? I don't remember if I read this. Peter says I had to take a break due to in real life stuff, trying to catch up on Endwalker so I can finish watching the streams. Oh, well, if you haven't done Endwalker yet, then you have tons of stuff to look out for, to enjoy. Eska says Reaper needs some actual benefits to using Harvest Moon. They do? It's a little awkward because of the way that it works. It feels like, if I remember correctly, I looked into it in my monk history video. In Heaven's Ward, monk learned the meditation skill and the forbidden chakra, but they didn't actually learn any way to passively generate chakra stacks. So that meant the only way to generate chakra stacks was to stand there and spam meditation, which means that the purpose of the forbidden chakra and meditation back in Heaven's Ward was basically the same as what Harvest Moon is for Reapers. It's a single-use attack that can be used in specific scenarios. In Monk's case, it was just use it if you have it for free damage. And for Reaper, it's if you're out of range, you can use it instead of Harp to not lose damage. In fact, you said it yourself, it's good damage. But generally, The priority is like 1, if the fight calls at any point for you to be out of attack range during a GCD, then you use Harvest Moon there. And 2 is there any AoE? Because shockingly, Harvest Moon is one of your best AoE attacks, on top of being ranged. To use it there. If it's big enough, if the damage is big enough, the amount of mobs is big enough, then it's actually better to just use Harp when you're out of range, and then use Harvest Moon when the big AoE opportunity comes. But it's a very awkward action. Alright, Jenny, thank you for checking in. Licky says Communion's best AoE. It is better, I believe. Yeah, it is of course better. Both, well, actually, let's see here. 600 plus 300 per target. So let's say there were 11 targets. And that would be 3,600 on Communio. That would be 1,100 plus 10 times 40% of that. We need more targets. What if there was 21 targets? Okay, it's going to take a little bit more. Wait a minute. I'm dumb. Of course it'll never catch up, because Communio starts at a far bigger potency. You need infinite amounts of targets, because while Communio scales worse, relatively speaking, to Harvest Moon, because it only does 40% of its total damage to every other target, Harvest Moon does 50%. So Harvest Moon gets more value out of more targets in the way that Harvest Moon becomes better, like it scales better. But the base value of Communio is too great for anything to beat it. Like 1,100, if you take 40% of that, that's still more than 300. 119,000 misery. Oh yeah, remember that's a healer, everyone. It's a healer. Hmm. 98 Bahamut. Well, I think it's going to be very difficult to get anything super impressive compared to that. So the reason why I say that is because so Afflatus Misery does 1,240 potency. 0.1. And then the key thing is that healers and mages in general have this maim and mend trait that makes your attacks just inherently do more damage. Now you might be thinking, but wait, Kai, Akmon says right here that it does 1,300 potency, so that's better, right? That's better than Afflatus Misery. Yes and no, because Akmon is cast by a pet. And anyone that knows a little bit about pets in Final Fantasy XIV will be like, oh yeah, because pets do like 85, 82, 87, thereabouts of the damage that a player does. Like this, maybe like 90%. The point is that it does visibly less damage. Visibly less damage than a player will. Always. I can't. The thing is, Gazel, that it's because it's like a variance, right? Like if you sit down and have a pet attack for like 30 minutes, which will take you an eternity because pets don't really attack like that anymore, then you might, based on variance, find that it's like 82%, 85%, 87%, 90%, depending on crit luck, depending on actual like random variance, because as you may see, if you use, like, you can get a critical direct hit with your strongest attack. And one time you see it do, I don't know, 80,000 damage. And then with the exact same setup, like precisely the same setup, with all the same buffs, you do it again, and then it does 90,000 or 95,000, like an enormous range. And that's because there's like a random factor when you use an attack. That's why if you spam like Ruin 3 on a dummy, it will like damage in a range. Jojo Ranryu did 123,000 in the kill pool. I think the strongest attack in the game is Jojo Ranryu. Aside from limit breaks and like optional actions from Boja and things like that. But I'm pretty sure Ninja has the strongest single GCD or OGCD in the game. Because it is also 1300 potency. Which means it is just as good as Archmon, just without the whole "it's a pet" stipulation. Caetsu says, does my own movement still affect pet's damage? No. It does not. As far as I know, so your Bahamut will cast 4 auto attacks during its existence. Phoenix will do the same. If you demand that they use their Enkindle or something, then they will use that too. And I think the fastest Bahamut can do its 4 attacks is with like a GCD of 1.5. So if it's running out of time, it will do it faster, as we demonstrated earlier. It will actually do it faster. And that also includes if you interrupt it with Enkindle. So it will find in those 15-ish seconds it's there, it will find time to use 4 attacks. And if you have it run around with you, it will eventually do those 4 attacks, assuming it isn't unable to attack anything for too long. The only one where your movement might affect the pet is Scholar, because if you move around a lot, your pet should still cast Embrace on cooldown. But if you're running too far away, as you might have seen on the recent solo challenge stream, then your pet might lose healing by having to chase you down. Which can happen, shockingly, despite Embrace having a 30 yalm range. But overall, the potential loss is going to be minimal. My advice is when you start, if you play Scholar, only important if you play Scholar. If you play Scholar, when you enter a boss fight, just use Place and just place your pet in the middle of the room. Just done. You can optimize this further by like micromanaging the pet, like so. Like if we said this Zuriel Umbra was in my party, like I specifically go out of my way to center my pet, like in general around where my party is, so that there's a better chance that Whispering Dawn, which only has a 15 yalm radius, is going to hit everyone. But overall, that is the only thing you need to do to optimize your pet. And even if you order it to run around, it should still cast Embrace on cooldown. So that is like a minor issue. Matthew says, speaking of variants, what's the limit break variance now? That is a good question. We could try a little bit. I heard that in 6.4 they adjusted potencies on limit breaks to make them more in line with each other. So I'm going to guess that they do the let's just do Lapis Manalis, because it's like a really out of the way dungeon. It doesn't spoil very much. But I'm guessing that Summoner and Summoner, Mage and ranged physical limit breaks are more in line with each other. So if I put down a striking dummy here, then we cast. And for anyone curious, there's this Explorer mode button in the Duty Finder menu. where you can go in and just hang out in a dungeon. You can even mount up in a dungeon. 266,000-ish. We can test this a little bit. A little less, I think. Wait, that was 60. Yeah, that was closer to 65. I'll do 5 of them. Not very much for a statistic. Also 65. That's like just in between. There's something worth noting is that the limit breaks, I believe, scale with everyone in your raid's weapon damage. That's 60. I would say that's like 60, like 65, 265,000. Well, 265,000 to 266,000. So like the average is right between that. That's like if that is actually the variance, then it's like close to 0.3% variance. Like if that actually applies, it's extremely small. And yeah, exactly, like it's like the average. It's the average. The thing is, whether it's the average item level of everyone's weapon or it's the average weapon damage is difficult to determine, I think, because the weapon damage of your weapon scales with the item level. But the idea is it scales with the average, like, values of your... Licky, what I mean is that if you have an item level 1 weapon, it's going to have weapon damage as an item level 1 weapon. If you have an item level 630 weapon, it will have weapon damage as a 630 weapon. Yes, it scales up less often, but when you gain like 10 item levels, you gain usually like 1 weapon damage or something like that, 1 or 2. Licky, I'm not talking about the auto attack or delay values. I'm talking about the physical damage. Can you see that? That is an item level 620 weapon. Its physical damage is 123. So let me find the axe that is 630, which should be somewhere. It's not that. There it is. 125. 125. 125. 125. 125. All of them are going to be 125. That's what I'm talking about. Whether you look at the item level or the actual damage of the weapon is insignificant. The auto attack is actually something that is also standardized across all weapons. The general idea is that it does 90 potency every 3 seconds, physical potency. And the auto attack value is actually equivalent across all weapons. So what you'll see is that because the warrior's axe hits 50% slower than the paladin weapon, the auto attack value is going to be exactly 50% larger. And that holds true. So that's like an entirely different story. Anyway, the point is that limit breaks scale with the average like quality of your raid's weapons, which is like a really like small like slice of the quality of your raid's equipment. Gason says, speaking of fairy, after the 6.4 changes, I'm so used to it and press the fairy actions before she catches up to the party in dungeons, making the tank not getting the buff. This is actually also a very interesting detail. If you have your pet follow you around and then you call a command, this is where the 6.4 change sets in. If, on the other hand, you're commanding your pet, if you're commanding your pet then that actually takes priority over any other commands you've given it, which means that the devotion dance, as I have aptly nicknamed it, is still functional. And the devotion dance is because back in Shadowbringers and before, the summoner action Searing Light was called Ether Pact and caused your pet to cast devotion, which did largely the same thing, but because your pet did it, you could order it to run in circles and then call devotion and then just ordered it to run in circles and then like 30 seconds later have it do it, but your cooldown went down by 30 seconds while it was doing that. Really janky trick, but a trick. It's actually in one of my videos. Multiple of my videos I mention it in. Eska says, my Dragoon is hitting 416,000 with it. Its weapon is 620, but my Reaper hits 444,000 with a 630. Yeah, so a key thing is if you're alone demonstrating this to yourself, then of course it's only your weapon, so 10 item level is going to impact the damage quite severely. It would also interestingly make very good sense that the Reaper one does like nearly 10% more damage than the Dragoon one with only 10 item levels, because that's something like... well, actually, no, it doesn't make sense, because it's like 2% more physical damage. Anyway, yeah, it scales quite significantly. The key thing that actually matters about limit breaks, and this is also something that I say in my 6 tips for X guides, is if there's more than one target, then you would want a mage or a ranged physical to use limit break. If there's only one target, then you want the melee to use limit break. That's how tight the scaling is. And in at least 1 or 2 of those guides, I mentioned that the ranged physical, so Machinist, Bard, Dancer, does slightly less damage with its limit breaks. Whether that still applies is not super important. We can test that. 266,000, right? 266,000-ish. Still around 10% less. So that means that you would go, oh, so ranged physical shouldn't use limit breaks because they're worse than mage and melee in every situation. Yes and no. This is a case of opportunity cost. Let me answer Gazel's question first. I see, so I just have to place the fairy where we would stop, then use fairy action? Yeah, basically, if you want to control where your pet is going to use its pet actions, you just order it to go there, and then you order the action. Then it will go exactly there and use it, even if it messes you up. That means that ordering your pet in this way is equivalent to, like, as a white mage go, I'm placing Asylum there. That's equivalent to having your pet go there and use Whispering Dawn. Basically the same effect, it's just an extra step. So, opportunity cost. It's less true nowadays because Machinist is really strong, but it has become a little bit true again because Black Mage is really strong. So what do I mean by opportunity cost? All melee DPS, all 5 melee DPS do very close to the same, like they perform almost equally well, typically, like within nearly like an extremely small margin of each other when played perfectly. So who in your raid uses limit break among the melee DPS is not that important. It is important because if you have a Dragoon and a Samurai, for example, Dragoon does less personal DPS. And Samurai does more personal DPS, which means when the Samurai is standing there with its blade using limit break, it is losing more personal damage than if the Dragoon stood there and used its limit break, because it gains less like the Dragoon actually does less with its like damage over the duration of a fight. So if the Dragoon does a limit break, it will actually benefit the raid more than if the Samurai does it, because the Samurai loses more of its personal damage, whereas the Dragoon's raid buffs, well, that's not a quote, literally its raid buffs are a bigger portion of its total value to a raid. Like, if we go down to the nitty-gritty of it, it's like that. Samurai, Black Mage, and Machinist are actually the worst jobs in the game at using Limit Break, because their damage just drops to 0 while they're casting it. Whereas all other DPS jobs has at least some form of damage boost for the raid that still applies in some capacity, which means that the damage they lose when they're using Limit Break is overall a little lower, because a smaller portion of their total damage is dependent on you actually attacking. This then translates into why ranged physical jobs do less with their Limit Break. Mages usually do more damage than ranged physical jobs, and in some capacity, mages don't have as much time to cast a Limit Break as ranged physical jobs. For example, Dancer, yeah, you want to like generate your feathers, generate like this gauge, which your dance partner can also do for you, so it's not that big of a deal. But sure, you want to use like burst shot and stuff, and some procs will come up, but you do have 10 seconds occasionally where you're just going to be casting burst shot. And Machinist, again, is really bad at using Limit Break, because it doesn't really want to stop attacking, because of that whole like discussion we had earlier about that super strict rotation. It doesn't really want to do that. But there are significant portions of the Machinist rotation where you're technically just going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Meanwhile, Summoner has 1 free GCD per minute where it isn't doing something significant. Like, if you're using Limit Break as a Summoner, you're sacrificing one of your primals in that minute. And if you're using Limit Break as a Red Mage, that is going to possibly delay a melee combo that you might need down the line. And Black Mage, if you use Limit Break, Astral Fire or Umbral Ice is going to probably drop. Probably. Unless you like plan it out perfectly so that you just enter, then you use Limit Break, and then you quickly use an instant to like save it in the last moment. So all of the mages are really like disincentivized to cast their Limit Break. Meanwhile, the ranged physical jobs are looking at it like, well, it's more DPS than what I could do myself, so you're going to do it because it's overall beneficial. So if ranged physical and mage did the same damage, then by the same token, mage would be bad at using Limit Breaks, because it's a bigger opportunity cost. The mages can usually do more damage than ranged physical with their personal damage, and on top of that, it's more inconvenient for the mages to do it. So the best way they can balance it is by going, oh, but actually the ranged physical are worse at it. They're worse at using Limit Break, so that the mages have some incentive to try. But that then circles back around to what I gave you advice for in my 6 tips guides. If you have a ranged and a mage in your party in like a dungeon, and you're at the final pack before the boss, it is better to use an AoE Limit Break there. It's actually also better to use an AoE Limit Break there if you have a melee in your group. You will gain more from using Limit Break there than using it on the boss. But if you have both a ranged and a mage, the mage is going to be like, oh, I sure hope the ranged is going to do it because I just can't be bothered. And the ranged is going to be like, should I do it? It's technically better if the mage does it. And then no one does it. It's better to just do it. Just go for it, man. Just use the Limit Break. If the pack is clumped up and ready to get killed, go. Just do it. I don't care if you're the ranged or the mage. And your DPS partner probably doesn't mind either. You get to have the honor. You get the boring Limit Break one. and Ymir directs our attention to the limit break bar. Matthew says, Red Mage limit break will wipe the group anyway. Ah yes, the perfect incentive for Red Mage to use limit break. That's actually a good point. How often do you see a Red Mage just out of nowhere cast limit break because it's funny? Often, because they have a little bit of downtime, just like ranged physical jobs. You don't see a Summoner or a Black Mage randomly cast limit break very often. Because they don't have that kind of time. Santa says there's that time in top where all 8 players have to use limit break. Oh yeah. Well, you say have to, but apparently we discovered that the healer part is unneeded? Because you can cheese it or something? And Licky says Summoner can actually just use half primals and get some damage back. Yeah, like, you can do that. My point is more that most of your primals take 10 seconds or so. A little bit more than 10 seconds, like it's 5 GCDs typically. Something in that range. Garuda is like the weird one out, like significantly weird. But they take like 12-ish seconds to do. And if limit break takes 10, then it means that either you're losing like most of a primal, or you have to, like, as Licky says, you could use half of a primal, like you just go Ifrit, do the melee combo, and then you switch to Garuda, and then you just cast Slipstream, and then you switch to Bahamut or something. Like, you could do that. But the point is that that part in your group was just casting Burst Shot. They were just casting this for those 10 seconds. That would probably have been better served by doing limit break. Like that's the idea, that's the reason, that is the logic behind this thing where the limit breaks do different damage like this. If we were to, like, if the developers like really wanted to enforce it, they would probably make it so that all jobs do different amounts of limit break damage based on how big of an opportunity cost it is, but that would lead to people just making sure to have the best limit breaker use the limit break, and I don't think that's the intention. I don't think that's the intention. I think it's just that they don't want, like, by making melee limit breaks always best on single target, they make it so that people do that. By making mage do slightly more damage than ranged, it makes it so that the mages who would rather not have some extra incentive to do it anyway. So, I had actually, we managed to get down to 1/3 of the things that I had planned to talk about, because I was prepared for no one showing up to this stream. I was prepared to just talk with myself for a few hours, or at least 1 hour. So I had prepared a lot more to talk about. But I'll just have those to bring up another time. Now, if you would like... No, don't leave, Licky. My point was that I had prepared it so that we have something to talk about if you guys didn't have anything you wanted to talk about, but happily, positively, you have a lot to talk about. You have a lot of things you want to talk about, and I have a lot of things I can say about it. But what I wanted to say is that I was thinking of making these kind of streams a little bit more in the future as the primary place where we will be doing these review streams of clip reviews, if there's going to be any clips. Otherwise, we can just talk about whatever. It's also a great opportunity for you guys to have a chance to think of a question. So, on that note, I just want to bring up again that there is a Discord community server if you're not a part of it. On that Discord server, there is a clip reviews room. In that room, you can, like, if you've played, done a dungeon, done a raid, done an encounter, whatever you want, you can post that clip, and then I will try to find time to review it. And reviewing means I will look over it, see if I can give any input, give you some advice. Like, for example, we gave Orion some advice about Reaper in the Euphrosyne raid. And of course, if you post like a Savage raid encounter that I haven't done, or you post like an ultimate that I haven't done, then it might be a bigger case of me sitting there like, let me see if I can figure out what's actually happening here if I don't know the mechanics, right? But I can still look at it and go, you're not using that cooldown at this time. Is that a good idea? So like, there's still something to talk about. And there's a big difference between, like, I can still review your rotation even if I don't know the details of the encounter. That of course leads to me going, oh, you could use your 2-minute burst here, and then I see a boss mechanic happen and go, oh, you're intentionally not using it, and things like that. I haven't like done the current Savage in a while. The last time I like participated in doing Savage raiding was back at the start of the last raid tier. I streamed it. We didn't beat P5S, and I focus a lot more on like a lot of different things and ratings, so very quickly I'll fall behind like the wave of players, and that makes it very difficult to find groups. Do know, however, that I have a few friends that would really like to get into it, so maybe one day we will have a static. But I don't really play Savage, but I have a huge amount of knowledge about raiding, just in general, like generally applicable knowledge. I have raided Mythic and Heroic before that existed in World of Warcraft, since at least Cataclysm, and up to and including Legion. I skipped most of Warlords of Draenor, but I have years of experience with raiding, even if I don't have a huge amount of actual playtime in Savage raiding in Final Fantasy XIV. But I also do have a huge amount of understanding of how Final Fantasy XIV plays, so we have, you know, the knowledge of naturally, if there's a boss mechanic coming up that is going to prevent the 2-minute burst, then the static or the group might be going, oh, we're going to delay our raid's burst by 30 seconds. Like, maybe that's a strategy. So like, I'm not just going, let me see here, I have the burst here from the balance, can you do that precisely? I don't even care if they're boss mechanics, you have to do like this. I'm not going to do that. We're going to be talking about what can you do better? Can you do better? Can I help you? I'm not going to like be bonking you with a hammer going, oh, you made this mistake. The point is, maybe you play really well and we like watch the review and go like, I have nothing to add. You played perfectly. Or maybe I can't find anything. But sometimes people like to have a second pair of eyes on their footage. So the requirements to the clip review channel, the clip review room, is mostly that you don't like just dump it with a huge amount of clips. Of course, that is automatically handled by it being in slow mode. So just, you know, if you have a bunch of clips, make sure there's space for others as well. But you can post clips, and typically I would prefer that it is either yourself that you post clips of. It can also be clips of me. Be like, hey, I feel like you played really poorly here. Can you review yourself for once? Totally fine. You can do that. You can even like clip it and post it. Like, I have not seen a single of those Final Fantasy XIV clip channels post a clip of me yet. So you could be the first. Orion used the clip functionality to do that recently, and that was really funny. But yeah, generally the point is I want to make sure I want to make sure that the clip you're sending is of someone who consents to me reviewing it. So in Licky's example, says, can it be a stream clip from my raid leader where I'm part of the fight? Yes, you might want to ask your raid leader if that's alright, if you want to be super sure. But yes, that is mostly okay. It's just that maybe some people aren't super comfortable with someone like sending me their stuff to review. Like, there's a difference between someone posting a video on YouTube and whether they want people to review it on YouTube, right? So that's what it's about. It's that I don't want to review something someone isn't comfortable with having reviewed. I hope that makes sense. Bondi says, please solve calories rampant for me. Is that the crazy mathematics mechanic in P12S that we talked about yesterday, Bondi? Is that one, or is that a different one? No, wait, that one was called something with factoring, right? I think I missed something. Iska said, I actually rated back in early Shadowing as my group got up to E3S, but no further. And Rubiok says, Caetsu static time, that would be cool to see. Yeah, that would be. We sometimes do like mount farming streams where we do old content with people from my free company. Those are often fun, and when we do those, you are also welcome to join us for them if you're on the stream and everything. We're trying to figure out planning it again. Nikki says, I don't think consent will be a problem to get. That's alright. But yeah, that's just, I'm going to ask about that if you post like a clip that isn't clearly not you. I'll be like, have you checked with the person that they're okay with that? And Eska says, what is your opinion on the Forbidden Black Mage rotation? Do you mean the Infinite Paradox? I have a video about it, Eska. I think it's hilarious. I present it as an opener because it actually is originally designed as an opener, but like specifically the Infinite Paradox one is designed as an opener, but it can be used at any point. Like, the opener just showcases the general idea. It is hilarious. It is also not easy to perform, especially if you have more than little spell speed. It is very much designed for a slow mage. And Bondi says it's a different one. Oh, well, I'll try to figure that out. See what it is. But yeah, if you want me to review a clip of something, then you can join the community Discord and post it, and then I'll see when I can review it. You might see that the clip that we reviewed today is from 2 weeks ago. That has been a good old case of me going, I don't know how I'm going to make a stream out of reviewing one thing. So I think it's better we do these where we review something and then we do something else. So that there's a little bit of stuff. Some people don't find it that interesting to watch someone react to clips for 2 hours. Poke Shack. By the way, Poke Shack, good to see you. You have water. Oh, I have tea. I'll drink tea for both of us. But yeah, I can look into anything. The particular subjects I would have the hardest time reviewing would be newer Savage encounters and ultimates. But I will try my best to give you advice. And then you might say, like, maybe you go, oh, that's incorrect, the boss works like this. Then we talk about it together. And then I learn something. And that's also fun. So the worst that can happen with you sending me a clip that I'm completely incapable of giving advice on is that you get to teach me for once, which might be fun for you. Have I missed anything else? Eska says, I love how silly Reaper is sometimes. I love seeing Shadow of Death randomly crit, direct crit for like 17,000. Don't you guys just love it when you use your strongest attack in your entire arsenal and it just hits for regular damage after you had 8 direct crits in a row? It's the best, right? Transpose theory is both the fundamentals and advanced theory of black mage optimization. That is correct. Licky says, if you're making a warrior guide, please don't make the same inner release infuriate mistake so many others have made. What is that mistake, Licky? Can you detail that? Because I actually have a warrior guide that I released back in December. I'd imagine that, so the whole thing with transpose lines and all this is that it gives you the opportunity to get more instant attacks. And I could imagine that your options there are either cast nothing when there's a lot of mechanics happening, or do transpose lines and shenanigans to get extra instant casts. I could imagine that, Bundy, and I'm pretty sure, Bundy, based on the conversation we had previously about the 3% buff on Black Mage, I'm pretty confident that that P12S is so incredibly evil towards Black Mage might be part of the real reason why they decided to buff Black Mage. I think I mentioned that in our discussion, that maybe the reason is that they believe that this raid tier is really, really evil towards Black Mage, so they need a little help to stay where they are in performance. Anyway, that's a longer discussion. Licky says, Nascent Chaos no longer consumes a stack of inner release. I have included that. Well, I don't even mention that it does eat I don't even, I think I say that you can use Nascent Chaos stacks during inner release because it doesn't consume it. The reason for that is because my original level 50 to 90 warrior guide, which has the blackboard background, the green background, it was from before this change. And my new warrior guide from back in December is from so much later that it is so distant that I couldn't imagine anyone would be like, but wait, infuriate, but inner release will be wasting stacks. No, it won't. Not anymore. It has not been like that for, I think, like a year or more. Exactly, Liggy Kitty. The thing is that I can't remember exactly which patch it was. We can, let's see, inner release. Gamerscape always has a really nice version history. 6.1 stacks of inner release now apply only to Fell, Cleave, and Decimate. So that's 6.1. So that's around 4 months into Endwalker, which means that pretty much all guides released around the release of Endwalker will have this incorrect. Now, I released my new warrior guide in December of 2022. Meaning that it is like 11 months, well, 7 months at least, 7 or 8 months after that. So I don't really say, oh yeah, by the way, Infuriate is no longer spent by inner release. I just say that it isn't spent by inner release, because it isn't anymore. Which is also why the opener that you will see, if you see me play Warrior in any background footage, I am, sometimes I will not use Infuriate during inner release just because I don't feel like it, but I will use Infuriate during inner release in openers and bursts and stuff like that. I will always do that because I know how it works. Eska says, I stuck the rotation I was referring to in the meme channel of your Discord. It includes Scythe and Umbral Soul in the uptime. The fun bit, somebody got a solid ACT with it at some point. That's the thing, is that doing Infinite Paradox and only Infinite Paradox, I believe Infinite Paradox is 92 or something like that % of playing like turret style, just full blast black mage damage. And 92% is close enough that if such a rotation serves any purpose whatsoever, then it is worth considering. Like, if the Infinite Paradox came with no benefit, then you had no reason to use it over just playing Black Mage quote-unquote properly. But the fact that the Infinite Paradox rotation offers a huge amount of mobility that your normal rotation doesn't, means that you have a rotation that allows you to do most of your damage while moving on a job that normally is known to not be good at moving. That is super helpful. That is basically the idea behind the like Infinite Paradox one. It's just that Infinite Paradox is a meme because it, like as Bondi says, knowing transpose theory is 110% of standard rotation DPS. Like, if you're using all of the tricks in the bag properly, you're going to do more damage, obviously. But using the specific mobility tricks when you have to, it will not increase your damage, it will just make it not zero while you're moving, like an excessive amount. And doing not zero damage is going to increase your overall DPS by quite a lot, I'm pretty sure. And of course you're not going to be using Infinite Paradox from the start to the end of any boss fight, unless you're intentionally doing so. But the idea makes sense. It makes sense that you can do this. It's just that the meme is, look, if you use all of these transpose theory tricks, as Bondi mentions, then you actually don't have to stand still ever. It's like a science experiment. Like, it's just a proof of concept. Black Mage is mobile. You can do this. I think that's what you mainly have to take away from it, and then just remember that the tricks that Infinite Paradox employs are all tricks that you can use in real combat. You probably just don't use them for minutes at a time outside of really drastic measures, right? But yeah, the reason why my Black Mage guide, which is also a bit old, doesn't go into transpose theory in in like huge detail is because I can make a Black Mage guide that explains everything from level 50 to 90, for example. I can explain how to play the Black Mage in general. I can even showcase like a taste of how transpose lines work. But to explain all of transposed theory both requires that I am a master of Black Mage and I am not a master of Black Mage. It's not my main. And as I've said previously, I think Black Mage is the kind of job that is, if you want to be good at Black Mage, it's your main, compared to something like Summoner, where you can play it almost perfectly as a secondary job. And transpose theory is more detailed and has more like examples and options and cases. That means that, do you want a level 51 to 90 guide that takes, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 minutes? Or do you want one that takes 50 minutes? Bondi says the main thing with transpose theory is, in a vacuum, is minimizing Fire 3 casts while under ice and Blizzard 3 casts while under fire. Perfect. That makes sense. I think I bring this up. I can't remember if I explain it specifically in the Black Mage guide when I take like the base, like the super basic, if you have Firestarter transpose line where you use something like Paradox transpose Fire 3 with Firestarter, is explained like that. I can't remember if that's included in my high level Black Mage guide. It's a bit long ago at this point, but I have explained this at least once, not twice, because that's the idea. It's better to cast Fire 3 in Fire state using transpose than it is to cast it in Ice. Puppeteer says, I know this is a stupid question. It's not, but why use Flare in AoE but not single target? So, I believe I talk about this in my level 1 to 50 Black Mage guide. Flare does more damage than Fire 1. So, we're specifically important, we're talking level 50. We're talking just level 50. Flare takes... Now, remember, I have a lot of spell speed. My Black Mage loadout is spell speed centric, like extremely, because I think it's fun to play that way. But Flare normally has a 4-second cast time. As Bondi says, you can raise a child in the time it takes Flare to cast. And Licky has the right of it. So Fire 1 does less damage than Flare, but if you have 800 mana, just 800, you don't even have to be able to afford Fire, because Fire 1 is going to cost 1600 during Astral Fire. If you have 800 mana or more, then you can cast Flare. But Flare takes 4 seconds to cast, which makes it worse than Fire, because Flare is only like 20-ish% better than Fire 1. And it takes a little bit more than 50% longer to cast it. So, like, it's actually better to just go into Ice and get some new mana and go back into Fire. But, as Licky says, what if you Swift cast it? If you Swift cast Flare, now the important thing here is, if you Swift cast Flare during an instant cast, then it takes just as long to cast Flare as it takes to cast Fire 1. Which makes it kind of worth using, but it's such a specific case. And then there's also the part that if you, and this is especially again important at lower levels, if you for any reason needed that Swift cast to keep attacking while running, then you have lost more damage than you would have gained by Swift casting Flare. So the stipulations for casting Flare on single target is, 1, you need to have a Swift cast to actually line that Swift, like you need to have a Swift cast to make it worth it, and you need an instant cast like Firestarter Fire 3 to line that Swift cast up. 3, you don't want to waste that Swift cast if you needed it for something else, and you might, because at lower levels you don't have access to all these transpose theory tricks that we're talking about. So if you don't have Swift cast, it's going to cost you much faster, and you're only gaining like more than 40 potency because of Astral Fire. But it's like, if you waste 1 or 2 seconds not casting anything where you could have Swift casted something, then the gain from casting Flare in that moment has been lost, I think, in my opinion. Given that I can see that we have that Bondi might know better whether that is true or not, but I stand by that should be mostly correct. The primary ways you can line that Swift cast up is either with a Firestarter proc from Fire 1, Fire 3, Swift cast Flare, or a Thundercloud proc. Use Thunder, Swift cast Flare, and then of course you use Blizzard 3 and get new mana. I hope that answers the question, Puppeteer. But yeah, exactly. It is sometimes worth it if you have Swift cast, but it is very strict. Super specific situation. So, yeah. Right. Has my chat died? Did I talk you to sleep with Black Mage talk? We died it. you're also gonna be level 50 for such a short amount of time. It's not worth getting into muscle memory. Exactly, Bundy. There's that, and like when you get Fire 4, then Fire 4 is a lot stronger than Flare, so then you're suddenly into the whole question of, is that even worth it? Is that even worth it? So, as Bundy says, this is an optimization you can do, but it is super strict when you can use it, and you will find something that is going to replace that trick in a short while. I would say it's worth learning, if not for the fact that you're using a swift cast you might want for something else. I give this advice in my newly released low-level summoner guide as well, that you can use swift cast to gain like 50 potency in your ether charge opener, but if you do that, then you don't have swift cast for Ruby Ruin or Raise, so you might not want to do that. Which is a little bit of the same logic, right? You might need that swift cast. At max level, or at least at higher level, you will be more experienced. You will know whether you actually need it better. So it's more worth taking that risk. Hey me, who else? I hope you're doing well. But yeah, actually need Swift to fit Slipstream inside raid buffs. That is true. But not at level 50. At level 50, the only thing you can use Swiftcast for is to sneak Ruin into Aether Charge, or use Ruby Ruin, or Raise. Or regular Ruin at some point. Right, so I think that is a pretty good time to say that was a Hangout stream. I'm really glad you guys actually came around and hang out. Because I know sometimes our streams can be like a little quiet, so I was worried that, imagine if we had a stream where we were just talking. So, as I mentioned, I'm just going to link it one last time. If you want some clip you've done reviewed on a stream like this, then you can post it in the clip reviews channel on the community Discord server for the YouTube channel. You can also just hang out in the channel. That's where I normally post about things like a sudden tea time stream that I plan 40 minutes in advance instead of days in advance. Gazel says that you would want to learn Black Mage every 10 levels in case of the roulette. Yeah, something like that. That's actually accurate. Now, I don't have anything else. I'm a little bit like, oh, I kind of have to end this stream because in 38 minutes, the watch I don't have, I'm releasing a video. So it would be very awkward for you to have to choose between watching the video and watching the stream. Yeah, part 2 of Summoner Guides, the high level part, is coming in a little bit. Thank you guys for... the video won't go anywhere, that's true, but still, I don't have anything else. So, thank you all so much for watching, and good evening, good night, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. And if you have any job questions, always remember I answer the comments on my guides, I answer on Discord, so you're welcome to ask. I'll see you guys. At the very least, I'll be on the premiere tomorrow, and on stream Saturday, where we continue the main quest. See you!